Welcome back to Relational Lives. We've got another very special guest here today, Dave Zaple, who is going to talk to us about his journey with mental health, mental ill health, and what he'd like to share with other men who might have this man-up attitude. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you here. Where do we start with this then, do you think? Because it sounds like, you've had quite a journey here.
Yeah.
With your own experience. I wonder if maybe starting with what your job was and the impact of that, because obviously we know it, but it would be really good to share that.
Yeah, sure. So I was a paramedic for 13 years, 12 and a half, 13 years. Did a variety of roles within the ambulance service. So worked on ambulances. I worked on a specialist response team. I was a reservist in the Royal Air Force and deployed to South Sudan. I then got a job on the air ambulance. So worked for the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Air Ambulance for 4.5 years. And I guess that's where I acquired the majority of my trauma that sort of really took me on this journey of mental ill health. The air ambulance doesn't tend to get deployed lightly. It often is going to the worst things every day. And as somebody said to me a couple of days ago, that person's worst day of their life is almost your everyday.
Yes, gosh, that's a really interesting way of putting it, isn't it?
And whilst it wasn't my trauma specifically, I was being exposed to that trauma every day. And we have ways and means of managing that, but the cumulative trauma that I faced in my professional life and also in my personal life basically combined to me having an episode of mental ill health. Episode of mental ill health.
Yeah.
And ultimately a bit of a breakdown.
Right. So, well, I don't know if you have anything to ask. I'm sure you do, but I've got a lot of questions here.
Yeah, we'll go far away.
Well, I was just wondering about, during that time that you were accumulating those traumas, whether you knew that, whether you were aware that that was going on, or it was just this is what I do, get on with it.
Yeah, I'd always been acutely aware of, I thought I'd always been acutely aware of my own mental health, because I'd seen bigger, bolder, better people than me succumb to the traumas of the job and really change how they were. And in a couple of the roles that we had, we actually monitored the jobs that we went to, in terms of it almost scored some of the jobs in terms of how traumatic they were. The thing I've learned subsequently with trauma is that it can affect one person completely differently to how it affected somebody else. They could both be from similar backgrounds and doing the same job on the same day, but they can have completely different experiences afterwards. So I was aware of my own mental health, but I think I was always just trying to get to that next bit of time off, and that I had a weekend off in mind for my first episode, and I was like, right, if I can just get to that weekend, then I've got a weekend off, we can have a lovely time, and hopefully that'd help it.
Gosh, so just keeping going and having those little windows where you could head towards to give you some sense of relief, I guess, without realising. Yeah,
one of the top tips that a colleague of mine from the military would always say was always have your next bit of leave planned in, know when it's going to be.
And that's because you got that to then look forward to as a breather almost.
Yeah. But this particular occasion, that weekend off coincided with some trauma at home, and my wife was bitten on the face by a dog, and then all of a sudden I'm driving my wife to the hospital where I take all these poorly people to, just in my normal
that's
clothes.
Two worlds really meeting, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was not long after COVID, so I wasn't allowed in to the hospital that I work for because I wasn't the patient. Thankfully, we managed to get seen pretty quickly. But yeah, that's when those two worlds collided, and that was almost the breaking point. I had another week. I went on an expedition for a week, and then came back on a stag do, and it, as with a lot of things, alcohol was a bit of a catalyst to really realising that I wasn't okay. Thankfully, my breakdown was surrounded by my absolute nearest and dearest friends, and they supported me. And then the following week, I went for something called TRIM, which I don't know if you've heard of. It stems from the military, but the emergency services use it a lot. It's called Trauma Risk Identification Management. It's essentially a series of questions that identify how traumatised somebody is, or gives them a score, and then reassesses them in a couple of weeks. And I went with a list of things for the TRIM practitioner. And the first item on the list was, who supports you? Because this is a big list. And thankfully, the person that I spoke to was the head of wellbeing for the trust at the time, because she knew where the referral came from, which department. And she was like, I'm taking it because I've done this job for 20 years and I don't want any of my other staff who might be slightly less equipped to deal with it to have to listen to that. I was like, okay. And then rattled through this list.
What did that tell you, like hearing that from that person? What
it gave me some reassurance, but it was like, I didn't want to traumatise them with my trauma. So I was trying to safeguard everybody else. The most important thing she said to me was, do you think you should go to work on Thursday? That was when my next shift was. And I said, I think I could go to work, but I don't think I should. Because I knew that I wasn't okay. And she agreed, and she said, what I think you should do is go home, call the doctor and get some time off and go from there. I was like, okay. And that's what I did. And that started 5 months, 5 months off work. Very fortunate that I was supported by the charity I was working for, so they paid into a psychological support. So I had a clinical psychologist within 2 weeks of being off. Okay. I had lots of therapy.
Yeah.
Can I take you just back a little bit, in terms of, I think when we hear things like breakdown and a sort of mental health crisis, and of course it can happen in all sorts of different ways, and you said it was the sort of alcohol that kind of was the sort of last thing that kind of maybe released something for you at that stag do. What did it look like, your kind of, if you like, your breakdown? What was that like?
Well, that event was me crying in a car park on my own. And it was really emotional, obviously, but there was
what event was that with the stag do?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
In hindsight, I'd probably drank too much too quickly, as we do on stag do's sometimes. But like leading up to that, I think there were in hindsight much more sort of warning signs before that.
So not necessarily realising at the time if it was hindsight.
Yeah, and also afterwards, I was, for some reason, had this perceived idea that PTSD or sort of trauma-related depression, like you'd always have trouble sleeping, and I slept like a baby. I'd never slept so much in my life. I was like, I can't be that bad because I can sleep. In fact, I'm struggling to wake up, which I've never had before. I've always been pretty sprightly in the mornings. I've later learnt that is another sign of
indeed,
of that sort of trauma. So, but yeah, like the bad dreams wasn't really getting any because I was sleeping so much. But that's afterwards I've learnt that's how your brain heals often is during your during the REM cycle of your sleep, and I inevitably wasn't getting that, or the trauma was too big for my brain to be able to process in the speed that I wanted it to process it.
Yeah, it was almost too much for your brain to comprehend.
Yeah, and interestingly, the therapy I had, EMDR, and you guys probably know much more about this than I do, but the eye movement desensitization reprocessing mimics the eye movement that you get during your REM sleep. And that was a whole another journey in itself.
Yeah. We're both trained in EMDR, so understand that it can be such a helpful therapy and approach.
Yeah, really powerful tool, but like it's tough. Going through any sort of therapy is tough, but so worthwhile.
Yeah.
What do you think for you the part around being male had on how you dealt with what you were experiencing and your job, and how able you were to ask for help?
It's tricky. I kind of grew up in a military family where we didn't often talk about our feelings or emotions or like how we were feeling, and there's definitely a stereotype amongst a lot of men and who struggle to open up, who struggle to say that they're not okay. And more often either mask it with other things or alcohol or bravado or ego. But I think since opening up to people, it's amazing that the conversations I've had with other people around their own mental health and their own journeys. I didn't know what EMDR was. I didn't know what the acronym stood for before the therapist suggested it. And I met up with some friends and colleagues at Leave and Do and mentioned that this was the plan and this is what I was going to have. And they were like, there was 3 or 4 people in that room that had also had EMDR at various points in their career. And it was amazing. Had I not said, oh, I'm going to have this therapy, I'd have never have known that 2 or 3 of my friends have had it and it had been really successful.
And they were all men.
And they were all men, yeah.
So really culturally, like you're saying, with the culture that you've been brought up in and the culture perhaps in which we live, where men don't necessarily have that permission perhaps to, like you say, be more open and vulnerable. Even a surprise to you that when you mentioned it, that actually all those people hadn't mentioned it either.
Yeah, and I guess it's not, if you're not talking about the subject, if it's not being spoken about, you would never find out.
Well, I guess that's the difference between men and women, isn't it?
I was just thinking that because I was thinking, well, women would do that
straight
away.
We would just say, oh, I'm having some therapy, we go for coffee and we'd sit across each other and say, oh yeah, I'm having some therapy, I'm really struggling, and that would come out in conversation.
Or even if not having therapy, we would be saying how I think women generally say how they're feeling and what's going on much more in their lives. So I think it's a much more natural sort of thing, isn't it? But culturally, again, maybe more acceptable for women to do that.
I think I've obviously done a lot of reflecting and a lot of looking into like the mental health sphere, and I did a couple of talks to some colleagues when I went back to work, and just to sort of explain the journey that I'd been on and hopefully maybe help some people along the way. And there's a phrase that I've picked up. I kind of don't really like it, but it's be nice, ask twice. And it's like saying, hi, how are you doing? And it's often a way that we greet people as saying, oh, you're all right.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, I'm all right. But are you okay?
Yeah.
And then it's that second sort of asking gives people an opportunity to really say how they're doing.
Yeah.
Or to like permission to actually say.
Because you're actually asking. It's not just
because you're actually
hello,
asking, and you've actually asked twice.
Yeah.
And that is something that I try and do. Or if I just often if I share something about myself, or like if I've had therapy that day, or if I'm having therapy tomorrow, and they're like, "What are you doing tomorrow?" I'll tell them. Like I'm not ashamed to say that I've had lots of therapy. But it's been.
Are you proud of it?
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I think it is the most. It's the most self-development that I've ever done.
Right.
And some people ask, like, would you change, like, if you could go back in time, would you not do that job and not do this? And the answer is no. I'd do it again. Because I've learnt so much about myself.
Because a lot of people, and maybe not just men, but there is this idea that if I'm vulnerable, I'm weak. If I'm showing my uncomfortable emotions, if I'm crying, if I'm suffering, I'm weak. But I don't see that as the case at all. I see it as a very courageous thing to do.
I do now. I didn't always. it was very much why has this affected me so much, where there's people that I worked with on the aircraft that had a lot more experience, been exposed to a lot more trauma, got a lot more going on in their personal lives, and are still doing the job every day. I was like, why can't I do that?
Yeah. So that's interesting, isn't it? Because you're saying about those people, but I think you said earlier there were also other people who were in similar sort of experiences where you had seen them go through various mental health kind of crises or whatever. So interesting that the focus for you was more on those that seemed to be managing.
Yeah, and from the outside, I guess we're all managing, and those sort of snippets into people's lives, particularly on social media, you only get the highlights. You don't necessarily see that, like, they're getting in from work at stupid o'clock in the morning and having a glass of gin to help them go to sleep, and like, it's not something that you advertise until you have these, like, I guess, deep conversations with people, and you realise that we've got some shared experience here, and that they might give a little insight to something that helps them, like, be it cold water or be it breath work or something that helps keep them on the level and manages their stress. And you can be like, oh, I might try that. Yeah.
But so you didn't see it as a strength originally?
No.
You looked at other people and thought, hang on a minute.
Yeah,
what's up with me?
Yeah.
And now?
And now it's I've very much come to terms with the fact that was a part of my life, and it's definitely a transition.
Yeah.
Like, I've always been, well, through most of my adult career, I've been Dave the paramedic, and now I'm Dave the photographer, or Dave the barista. And I think part of it is very much a Western society thing as well. We hold our career very closely to our identity. Even yesterday, actually, we had Tesco delivery, and I got chatting to the guy delivering. And we both come from different careers. He's looking to go into the fire service, and he used to be a high up in a global financial company.
Yeah.
He's currently delivering for Tesco. But I would never have known any of that had I not spoken to him.
Yeah.
This seems to be a really important thing that I'm hearing with you, and I'm interested in how you came from the point of, you had all your therapy and maybe still are, and the experiences that you'd had with your mental health, and then to a point where it sounds like it's really important for you to talk about and share this, and hear other people's stories. And I'm wondering how you got to that.
I think, particularly in my sort of younger days as a paramedic, nobody talks about mental health. And definitely nobody shared anything about themselves. And I think it's really important, because any frontline role, be it the military or the emergency services, there's a high probability that you will see some nasty things. And if you're not either forewarned or have got an idea about how that might affect you, or like how that might show up in your day-to-day life, and where to spot when things might be going wrong, like, it could lead to another mistake further down the line. I'd always been interested in human factors. So human factors is essentially why people make mistakes, very much from the aviation industry in terms of flight safety. So there will always be a pilot and a co-pilot will check things, and they run a checklist. And this is moved into healthcare. There was sadly a lady died who was the wife of a pilot, and he applied some of the aviation safety to the medical profession. And when you go for an operation now, there is a checklist that team run through, because we are all human and we are fallible. But yeah, these sorts of things all bleed into like why people make mistakes. And if you're under a lot of stress, you're much more likely to make a mistake. And in those sorts of careers, the police, ambulance, fire service, the military, they're all fraught with like high risk, high stakes things. And if you're not clear with your colleagues about how you are, about where you're at, then they might think you're going to perform optimally. But if you let them know, even if it's something as small as I'm really hungry or I'm really tired, and they might pick up your slack a bit.
So that's really interesting, because you've experienced everything that you have in the profession that you have, and in all those areas as well. I mean, it sounds like you covered so much in the time that you were a paramedic and the different forms of that. And so important to talk about things. You can see the importance of sharing what's going on. And in terms of all those systems, as it were, is there a part of you that really wishes they would do more now in terms of what you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. There's still so much work that could be done for those coming into those professions, particularly in the ambulance service. That's the one I know best. I only left the ambulance service just under a year ago.
Oh, so it's not long, really.
No. And there's some really good people trying to make a real difference, but unfortunately, as with a lot of the NHS, it's underfunded. That they don't have the capacity or the time to be able to really make a difference. But there are I'm very fortunate there's some great charities out there that have helped me along the way as well. Because I've been in the military and the emergency services, I've sought support from a number of different people. Rock to Recovery is one of them. So I've had a sort of coaching / therapy through them. And there's another charity that's supporting me at the moment, actually, called REORG, and they help emergency services and military get back into exercise. And I've been fortunate enough that they have funded me to join a local gym, and that has, aside from the therapy, that's been the biggest thing for my mental health, is a new community and movement. And
how did you find them? How did you come across them?
I think I found about REORG through. I don't actually know.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because for other people, I'm wondering, and maybe that's some of the things we could perhaps put some of these into our show notes, just to sort of help people kind of, because if we don't know, if people don't know things are out there, it's really difficult, isn't it, to know what can be accessed, and especially if people are struggling. Yeah.
So REORG was set up by some former Royal Marines who identified that martial arts and CrossFit really helped them in their transition to sort of civilian life and help with their mental health. And we're actually doing a fundraiser for them at the gym coming up, that we're going to do 24 hours of hero workout. So a hero workout is like a tribute workout to somebody, typically in the military, that has died.
Oh.
But we're going to do 24 of them in 24 hours.
Wow.
I'm going to be doing 12 because I also do some social media work, so I'm going to be there photographing and doing their social media in between doing the workouts. But yeah, a couple of guys in the gym are doing 24.
Wow.
All 24.
Wow. Good for them.
Yeah. So you mentioned it's been a place where you found new community.
Yeah.
When you say new community, is that because you've come out of being a paramedic and that was your community?
A lot of it, yeah. I think also linking back to that identity thing, I'd always been Dave the Paramedic, so it was to find something else that I really enjoyed and really sort of gave me purpose has been hugely helpful. Yeah, so now I'm also Dave that goes to CrossFit.
And how did you get into... Oh, sorry, Ali.
It's okay, go on.
How did you get into photography? Or have you always been into it?
Yeah, I've always been into it. It was probably 9 years ago. My wife, Emma, her dad was getting married and he asked me to photograph his wedding. So I bought a new camera and I gave it a go. I was like, I'm not doing that again. That's very stressful. And I'd always sort of...
That's interesting, isn't it? That you're thinking, the levels of stress and the levels of stress that you experience.
Taking photos is really stressful.
Yeah, for your future father-in-law.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I'd always sort of taken photos at work and people were often asking me to take photos of things. And then a friend from work actually asked me to photograph her wedding, and she did not take no for an answer. I said, absolutely not. I can recommend loads of really good wedding photographers. But she's like, no, I want you to do it. And it happened to coincide with me being off work for that first time. And it was about 2 weeks after that episode in the car park, I was due to photograph her wedding. And I didn't know anybody but her. And I had the best day.
Wow.
I was just completely lost behind the lens, and it was just really cathartic to like really notice what was going on and like capture some lovely moments and think that perhaps there is something, if I can't go back to work for whatever reason, perhaps there is something else that I can do.
So at that point you hadn't thought, oh, I'm going to leave this role?
No.
Yeah. Because that must have been quite a big decision to make.
Yeah, I guess it took me three bites of the cherry to eventually leave. So I'd had lots of therapy. I then went back to work, and a year later I experienced burnout. It wasn't necessarily purely trauma related this time. It was more empathy fatigue, I guess. And I'd always been acutely aware that if I stopped caring about the job that I do or the situations that I'm in, I need to take a break. And there was one job and I didn't care, and it scared me.
That's so important to be aware of that, isn't it? Because I think you're right, that compassion fatigue is so common, I think, especially under the pressures that people are under now.
Yeah, and I thought, again, naively thought that I needed a holiday. I absolutely did, and I had a wonderful time away skiing. But I came back and like it was still there. And I had what should have been or could have been a really great shift, but I didn't enjoy it. And I didn't care enough about it. And there's loads of people, really, really competent, really good people that want to go and do that job because it's quite a prestigious job.
Yeah.
And that was another sort of factor, I guess, is that like I'd always wanted to do that job, and now I'm doing it. I don't want to do it anymore. And that sort of played into my psychology of it. So I actually went and did some surf therapy through the College of Paramedics. Got put in touch with, they were run by Devon and Cornwall Police at the time, and they were offering surf therapy to emergency service people.
Surf therapy? Tell us what is that?
Yeah, it's incredible. They're called Surfwell. You essentially go I went down to Cornwall for the day, sit around in a little circle, and all the instructors tell you about themselves and the journeys that they've been on. And then you have one-to-one surf instruction for the morning, then you have lunch, and then you have a one-to-one chat afterwards. And that was a definite turning point in my, I guess, mental ill health journey, because I was just sort of trucking along at work and like getting to that next point of leave, and like all these sorts of, I said to Richie, who was my instructor, I said, I feel like I'm waiting for another big job to give me an excuse to be off work. And that was the sort of light bulb moment that made me then phone my boss and say exactly that. I said, I feel like I'm waiting for that big job to give me an excuse to be off. And they were really supportive. They said, take all the time you need. And that was, I guess, the point that I realised that I couldn't do that role anymore. Like, for my personal life at the time and the circumstances that I was in, it was just a stretch too far. And then, again, about 6 months later, another job came up in a different part of the ambulance service where it's no longer as clinical as frontline. It was more of a training role.
Yeah.
So I did that for just under a year, but there was still an element of response. And yeah, ended up going to someone that sadly ended their life in front of a train. And that affected me way more than I anticipated. I didn't see that coming. I got home that night and I was crying on the lounge floor. And that was like, this is it. I can't do this anymore.
That was the final straw, as
that
it
was
were.
the the end of my ambulance career, yeah.
What's it like when you think about that now?
I think I'd like to have ended it more on my own terms. I think I knew that it was coming, but it then came quite abruptly.
Yeah.
And I had an inkling that, like, I don't want to do this role forever. I was looking at other things. But yeah, again, I wouldn't change it. I was fortunate that I could get some more therapy. And then, again, really fortunate that I could afford to change careers as well. And a job came up in a coffee shop that I applied for, and I really love coffee, and it was in a nice place. So yeah, I work there now, and it gave me the opportunity to really pursue my photography as well.
Wow, what a change.
Yeah,
what
huge.
A change.
Lots of careers that start with a P. Photography, paramedics. I haven't picked the next one yet, but
barista. No.
But, yeah, no, it doesn't quite work.
And you were saying about, I think it'd be really lovely to hear about SoulKind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So during one of those transitions between working on the air ambulance and the last job that I did in the ambulance service, I met a guy called Jamie in Nepal. We were both on a charity trek with a charity called Millimeters to Mountains, who help people that have been through physical or mental trauma. I was there actually as a paramedic and as a photographer, so took lots of pictures. Thankfully didn't need any of my paramedic skills. But yeah, got chatting to Jamie, and Jamie had a near fatal car crash 5 years before. Thought he might lose his legs. I mean, he nearly lost his life. But the fact that we were trekking in Nepal was amazing. And I've met loads of patients that have been in a very similar situation as Jamie, but I never got to see them in their recovery. Yeah. So to see Jamie doing so well and thriving was incredible. And he was telling me about SoulKind, this printed journal that he'd put together. And I said, oh, no way, I've got some of those on my shelf at home. He was like, wow, you must be the other person that bought it. You and my mum. But yeah, after that, he was kind enough to invite me to be the photographer for the next issue. So we're just finalising that at the moment, and we had that connection through trauma, and we both found like amazing solace with adventure in the outdoors. And Jamie started SoulKind from his ITU bed pretty much, because he was reading about other people that had been through huge adversity and finding real like inspiration from it. It's like, it'd be great if we could collate this. So that's what we've done. And it's essentially tales of human endeavour and resilience and connected to adventure that we're telling the stories of. And we've since turned it into a CIC, so a community interest company, to hopefully help some other people that have been in similar situations to us, be it physical or mental trauma, to give them access to adventure and to a community, and hopefully some storytelling along the way.
It's amazing.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much can come out of so much pain, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we meet some incredible people through it as well. And yeah, it's very much in its infancy.
Yeah.
But it is really exciting. And it kind of gave me that purpose. Like, I've spent so long and so much of my life in the ambulance service and linked to that identity that I thought that being a photographer or being a barista, like, I've just thrown it all away.
Yeah.
Where in actual fact, all of the experience that I've gained has led me to this.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have done it had I not been a paramedic. And like, even with photography, I specialise in photographing people, but you've got to make those people feel at ease. You've got to ensure that they're comfortable
and have a relationship with them,
and to get them to relax. Because lots of people don't like being in front of the camera.
Don't know what you're talking about.
Three of them.
We just love it.
Yeah, mostly uncomfortable. We've even asked them to turn off the screen so we can't see ourselves. But yeah, if you can sort of take that element away, not take the camera away, but like make people feel more comfortable.
So they forget the camera.
Yeah, and you can really demonstrate who they are, and like and hopefully, it's particularly at weddings or if it's I do some like branding work for people. So lots of people are really good at what they do, but don't know how to express that and to show it. And it's really cringy doing it on your own in front of your phone. So yeah, like all of that experience that I've got within the ambulance service has helped me get here, and to, I guess, my own self-awareness, and hopefully help some other people become a bit more self-aware so they can look after themselves.
I think that's such a really important message that you're getting across there. It's about, because at the time you don't know that. At the time you're going through these things, you don't know that there's going to be good come of this.
Exactly.
And it's really being able to trust that if you do the work, that good things can come from bad experiences.
Yeah.
And you don't know that at the time. It really doesn't feel like it, does it?
Absolutely not. It feels like you're in a big dark hole and you don't know like which way is
up, there a way out,
or how you're going to get out.
Yeah.
And sadly, some people never make it out. And
yeah.
I think the stat I read this week is suicide is the #1 cause of death for men and women under 35. Astronomical.
Shocking, isn't it?
Yeah, and if we can, even by talking about this today, if there's one person that listens to this or watches this and has that sort of, well, maybe if I try talking to someone it might help, then this has been worth it.
Yeah. Or even hearing you say, you were in this really dark place, you didn't know how you'd get out, if you'd get out, and now here you are thinking, I don't regret any of it.
No.
Amazing.
I really love that notion that, when you were seeing all those really traumatic experiences and then meeting Jamie, isn't it, saying in Nepal, and seeing the other side. It's like, it's almost a parallel, isn't it? It's like you didn't see the other side. You never saw necessarily what things ended up as, and people who did survive, and so to me there sounds like there's a lot of hope that's in there.
Hope and I guess excitement for the future. When I was like unwell and in a really dark place, I didn't know what the future would hold. And it was scary. Like I didn't know what my next career might be. Like, will I go back to the ambulance service? Can I find another job? Is there anything else that I can do? I think specifically in uniform services, a lot of the time, it becomes so much of your identity, you can't imagine doing anything else. And it's a bit cliche, but there's so many transferable skills that you learn in that environment. And I was quite fortunate in that the people I talked to in different walks of life, and I'd quite often pick their brains and be like, do you reckon I could do that? And I'm like, absolutely. Like, think about it from a business point of view. Like, anyone in the emergency services doesn't know what they're turning up to. Like, they'll get a brief 10-minute heads up of what it could be. But then you go and you have to manage that entire situation. You have to liaise with other people that you've never met and problem solve in, like, often literal life or death situations.
I watch Ambulance.
So do
I absolutely love that programme.
Me
and
too.
I'm so in awe of these paramedics, how they just go in and they just seem to know exactly how to deal with it, exactly what to say, the compassion, it's just...
It is extraordinary, isn't it? They're amazing.
So
absolutely amazing.
Those skills are skills that you can use anywhere, aren't they?
Yeah, but I guess it's that hope that you can find somewhere you can use them. And or even just like reframing where you're at now and apply it to something else. So apply it into business and like a good decision maker, and you're like, oh yeah, I've made a few. Like, or works well under pressure, and I'm like,
yep.
I guess so.
Tick.
Not even I guess so, I mean definitely.
And I guess it's something that particularly in the paramedic profession that we're not very good at selling ourselves. We tend to be very humble people, and we don't like the praise and the attention.
That's a lovely quality in itself, though, in some respects, isn't
Humility,
it? And that's, that you're taking again through as another important value and skill.
But when it comes to getting a new job, it's quite maybe a little bit detrimental because you do need to sell yourself a little bit.
Yeah,
especially these days.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, it's pretty competitive, but yeah, I mean, definitely finding SoulKind has given me that huge sense of purpose.
I think that's the thing as well, what you're talking about, Dave, is it's not just I'm a paramedic, that's my identity. You've got a few things going on.
Yeah.
So it like your eggs aren't all in one basket now. There's different things going on that give you purpose and a sense of achievement. Definitely.
And I think like the biggest thing that I've taken from all of it is I've now got the time and more so the capacity to like really throw myself into the things that I'm really passionate about. So like SoulKind, like my photography, like I've got time to dedicate to it where I'm not in and out of shifts or wondering where my next time off is.
And in terms of another thing that I've heard with what you've said is the importance for sharing, the importance of support and the importance of community. And it sounds like you were in a position, you said, I was fortunate enough to have the support of loved ones around me kind of thing. And of course, some people don't necessarily have that kind of support, and it's therefore harder in a way, I guess, to reach out and find. But I'm wondering what sort of message you would like to give to people who have perhaps been in a sort of similar place that you were.
I guess one of the messages is that it can happen to anybody. It doesn't have to be because you work in the emergency services or like there's comparatively to the general population, there's very few people that have worked on an air ambulance in that sort of role. So like understandably, those people are going to see a lot more trauma, but it doesn't mean that that's any less trauma than whatever those people are facing in their day-to-day life. They might not do any related job. So it can happen to anybody, and talking to somebody about it, it doesn't have to be your parents, your friends, like just try it, opening up to somebody. You might just be overwhelmed by the response that you get or the sort of shared understanding that you get, that it's not just you in that deep dark hole, that other people have been there. In fact, one of the people at Surfwell, the concept that they use is you might feel like you're in a deep dark hole at the moment, and that therapy can often be like that reach down into the hole to help you out. But the ethos of the day there is we get in the hole with you and we'll help you out from there.
We're not at the top throwing you a rope down, we're going to get down there with you.
Yeah, exactly. Because some of us have been there and some of us have found our way out. So, yeah, that being, I guess, vulnerable enough to share where you're at is a really powerful thing.
And that's so important. It's a message that we always like to give, isn't it, in terms of being alongside one's own suffering, so, sort of with compassion, but also how somebody can be alongside somebody else in their suffering in order to be able to find a route out together. Definitely.
And it doesn't have to look like going on a podcast. It can just be chatting with somebody in a cafe.
Absolutely.
Especially those moments, isn't it? Sometimes just get a coffee and sit down and have a chat. Yeah, thank you so much, Dave. I could talk for hours, I think, about this and ask you more questions. It's been brilliant.
Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed today's episode with Dave. Please do subscribe to the channel, follow us, our podcast, and comment. We love to hear from you. See you again next time.